What round one talent might the Cowboys be able to steal at pick 44? We'll discuss that next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions, including, could the Cowboys actually select Omarion Hampton at 12? And why would that be such a bad pick? Plus, what's the difference between gap schemes and zone schemes? But Landon, let's start with this. Our first question here is about what the Cowboys might do in round two. This one's from Ahmed. He wants to know which prospects who are falling down the consensus board would you be the happiest to draft in round two if the opportunity were there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's take a visit with the famous Marcus Mosher consensus board and see who is currently kind of falling and like kind of discuss the names. So give me some names and some guys that are following on your list.
Yeah, so on February 1st, James Pearce was the 14th overall player, the edge rusher from Tennessee, by the experts. And again, you know the names: Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, Todd McShay. He's all the way down to the 33rd player on the consensus board, and it's falling. Is he somebody, Landon, that would interest you at pick 44?
It's interesting, right? And like there's obviously very serious reasons that he's falling. I mean, it isn't the athletic testing. I mean, he's tested out extremely well during this process. It's fairly clear just based on the whispers and on the lack of other negative information about this player that this is probably based mostly on off-field stuff, personality stuff, based on kind of, getting to know the player. So, I mean, I think it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, you look at the tape and you look at the athleticism, and absolutely, I would take him at 44. He's a high producer in the SEC. Certainly has the requisite athleticism that you want to be a pass rusher, and that's and all that. But I think that there is obviously reasons that he is falling so severely. It's not that he's a perfect prospect either by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly is a guy that, his profile fits as a first round pass rusher who is pretty steadily falling in at least half a round, like you said, in the last 2 months. And really the only thing we've done in that time outside of testing, which, like I said, he did very well.
Can I push back on that for a second, though?
Yeah,
real
sure.
Quick?
Yeah.
You're not wrong that he tested here at 6'5", 245. He ran a 4.47, which is unbelievable.
His 3-cone wasn't great.
Well,
Is that what you're going to?
He didn't do a 3-cone.
Yeah.
And his vertical jump was 31 inches, which I think it shows you there's a level of, or there's a lack of explosiveness and power in his lower body. He can run really fast. The player he reminds me a lot of is a current Cowboy, Dante Fowler, who Fowler ran an incredible 40-yard dash coming out of Florida, but had like a 7.4 3-cone. And I know our guy John Owning has talked about this all the time. Like he's really quick, straight line, but there's just not a lot of bend there. And I think that's maybe some of the concern if you're drafting a sub 255-pound edge rusher.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that vertical jump. That is just atrocious. Yeah, and then obviously, in my mind, not running a 3-cone is essentially the same as running a bad 3-cone, right?
Yeah,
like especially when you're an edge rusher, like you should be running a 3-cone.
If you were going to run a sub 7-second 3-cone, you were going to run like you would have shown that, right?
Yep. And again, like I think that's the issue is that, like, without a perfectly clean, I guess, athletic profile. I mean, look, even with that, I still think he's a, athletic profile wise, a first round pick, right? Like just based on production and the athletic profile, right? It's not the perfect athletic profile, but that kind of speed at that size, obviously he has the requisite athleticism to play the edge. It's clearly the fact that it's now I'll pivot, right? It's the combination. Like he doesn't have exactly the perfect athletic profile And then on top of that, the overarching issue of there being a whole bunch of just kind of whispers of off-field stuff, which again, we don't want to say something we don't know. We're just reacting to the way the teams are reacting to that stuff. So I feel like there's probably something there. So really it ultimately comes down to, do you want to kind of take on that risk and once you've got your hands on what it is?
Let's go to a couple other players. Walter Nolan, going into the week of the combine, was the 22nd overall player on the consensus board. He's now down to 31 overall. And again, that is right in the range where the Cowboys might be able to steal him at pick 44. I know you're a big fan of Walter Nolan, so I'm assuming this would be like a home run pick for you.
This is actually where I have Nolan. He's finally kind of fallen to where I have him as a bottom, the bottom of the red chip list, right? Like, so bottom of the first round, top of the second round. So yeah, if he comes down to 44, absolutely the Cowboys should run up there and grab him, because I do think he is a guy that he's an undersized, under tackle, but he's got some power. He can play in the gaps, and I think he still has some development to go as a kind of fully developed pass rusher. But you pair him with Odigizua, I think you can bring him along at a pace that is a lot more amenable to his skill set. I do think that there is again, he's another guy that there may be some coaching stuff going on. We mentioned before he went to A&M. From what it sounds like, from what we've heard people talk, it doesn't sound like the A&M coaches necessarily speak glowing about his time there. No. But then again, he blew up at Ole Miss once he got away from that A&M situation. So I just think it's about getting your hands around exactly the kind of person he is. So again, he has some Luther Burden to him in that sense, right? Where this is a guy who highly ranked recruit coming out of high school, has basically been, not coddled, but, has been basically chased after his whole career. And now we're getting into the NFL, and it's like, what's going to happen when you face a little bit of adversity, when you don't, get exactly what you want, or you're not the first pick in the first day? How are you going to handle that? And I think those are all questions that you want to understand before you draft someone like Walter Nolan.
Two more players that I wanted to mention to you, Landon. Emeka Egbuka, coming out of the NFL Combine, was the 19th overall player on the consensus board. Right now, he's 33rd overall, which again, you're talking about within 10, 12 picks of where Dallas is at. Is he somebody that if we get to Friday night and he's still on the board, that you would consider making a move to go up and get?
Yeah, maybe. This was something that we talked about, I think, when we even first evaluated Egbuka, right? Is that Egbuka is just one of these guys, and it seems like Ohio State has a lot of these guys every year, that there's just prospect fatigue, right? Like, we've been talking about these guys for so long. It's like there's just nothing else to talk about. Egbuka has done nothing but been incredibly solid all throughout his senior year, and before that, honestly. And then had a very solid offseason, pretty uneventful in the sense that he didn't do anything to really hurt or, certainly not help too much his draft stock. I just think that this is a guy that, like a lot of these guys, that has very solid, process during the draft process. That sometimes it gets boring, it gets stale, and you just see the name falling for no reason. But yeah, to answer your question, I think, look, if you're not taking a wide receiver at 12, if you take somebody else at 12 and you get down to 28, 29, and he's still there, I think I would. I would consider seeing at least what it would cost to get back up and to go get him, because I do think he is one of these guys who immediately comes in as your wide receiver too. And maybe he's not the super high-end dynamic guy that you're hoping that someone like Golden or Ted McMillan could be, but he will come in and be definitely your second best wide receiver. He'll be a solid pass catching option, and he will do every other aspect of being a wide receiver, whether it's blocking or whatever. Like, he will do that really well. And he'll be a leader in your locker room. So I certainly think I like him a lot. I have him as another red player. So if he gets close to the bottom of the second round, the first round, then I think it's worth exploring a little trade up.
One more quick one before we got to move on. Tyler Booker was around 23, 24 going into the week of the NFL Combine, had a poor performance at the Combine, and now he's into the 30s. Is he somebody that I know the Cowboys don't have a massive need at guard, but would he be somebody that you would take at 44 and be just smiling about?
It's too bad they don't have a massive need, because this is a massive man who could definitely fill a massive need. I wouldn't trade up for Tyler Booker because he's a guard. He is basically a guard only. I think you can play him at tackle if someone gets hurt, but you're not like trying to make him a full-time tackle. I would take him at 44 if he made it to us. I really, really like him. I think he could be a culture changer for your offensive line. Everything that, all the athletic testing and all that, stuff. Everyone knew that he was going to be bad at that stuff. You can't act surprised that he was but what he is he's a massive human being with almost 11-inch hands and 34-plus-inch arms who will bury you and likes to bury folks. So I think he is a physical presence. He will change the composition of your offensive line and change the composition of your offensive line room with his attitude. He's a culture starter for that offensive line. So if he's available at 44, depending on who else is there, I'm running up to make that pick.
Yeah, I mean, you draft them and you figure out how to get your best 5 onto the field later. The Cowboys also draft for future needs. Maybe this is a need that you have more in 2026 and 2025. You bring him in, you figure it out later, and I think you got a 10-year starter. I hate using that word, but I do think he's going to be a long-time starter in the NFL. All right, later, let's talk about a disaster scenario for the Cowboys at 12, where they pick not the first running back off the board, but the second. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love FanDuel. I love betting on FanDuel. They make it so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team, Lakers, or diving into the player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, because listen, we know that you guys have busy lives. I know you don't always see the very beginning of the game, but FanDuel lets you combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Nobody else is doing that right now. So don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Lane, let's get into this next question about Omarion Hampton, who I don't want to say I caused a little bit of a ruckus on Friday night, but here's my general thoughts before we get into the question. We've seen Mel Kiper now mock Omarion Hampton 3 straight times at the Cowboys at 12. I think that would be a disastrous pick. And I know there have been people out there that are saying, how do you know it's going to be bad? What if he turns out to be a really good player? It almost, to me, doesn't matter necessarily if he's a good or bad player. I think if he's even if he's a good player, it's probably not a great pick because of the opportunity cost, right? You are drafting inside the top 12. This is not a great football team right now. You are paying a quarterback the most money in the NFL. You're paying a receiver the second most money in the NFL. You're going to be paying an edge rusher the most money of any defensive player ever. You need to find quality players at expensive positions cheap over the next couple of years. And if you're drafting at 12, I think you've got to be able to do that rather than taking the second best running back in an all-time deep class. I wouldn't want to be the team doing that.
All right, I'd like to clean up a couple of things you say, and you tell me if I've done so correctly or if you disagree with what I'm saying. I think, to me, the biggest issue is the process. right? Like the process aspect of taking the second best running back at 12. And to kind of get to the money aspect of this, there's been a lot of charts that have kind of come out about, comparing draft pick salaries to free agent equivalents of that position in the market, right? And 12 is not the same as 4, right? Like it's drafting a running back at 12 is not the same as 4. So financially, it would be not great, but it wouldn't. You're certainly not. You're not like paying him. He's not even going to get paid as the top half of the market running back.
Correct. That was one of my concerns when the Cowboys drafted Zeke. Is you are already paying him like he's a top 5 running back in the NFL. Right. That part of it, I actually don't really care about with Hampton. Is that you are use a spot like edge rusher or receiver. You're drafted edge rusher at 12. That guy is now like the 52nd highest paid edge rusher in the league. They just need to be an average starter for you to get your value back on that pick.
Here's the problem, right? The problem is that all the folks that are making the argument for Hampton at 12 are standing on the shoulders of the argument of Genty at 12. And they're trying to make a lot of the same arguments for Hampton at 12 that don't apply to Hampton, right? Like, for instance, Genty is an elite player. Like Genty is, I don't have him as a blue chip player in this class, but he's the very top of my red chips. And frankly, tomorrow I could watch a tape and put him in there. Who knows? Like,
well, let's say it like this. I think at worst, he's a top 5 player in this class at worst.
Yes, absolutely. He is. Yeah, he's in my top 5, right? So that is not Hampton at all. No. And in fact, I would argue that Hampton is much, much closer to that third, I guess we're calling third tier of running backs.
Correct.
Than he is to Genty. So that kind of blows the talent argument of this completely out of the water, right?
And that's the biggest issue I had is I think I have mixed feelings about drafting Genty at 12, but at least you are getting a massive value in terms of where you're drafting versus the player, right? I like Omarion Hampton. He is my RB2, but he's 29th on the consensus board, and I have him right around there as well. Yeah. Drafting him at 12, not only is it a positional reach, it's just a massive player reach as well.
It's a talent reach and it's a position reach. And just to kind of put myself out there too, I have him as the bottom of my red chips, right? So he's like, and then like Henderson is touching his tag in the second round, right? Like, so, I think that's it, right? It's like, it's the reason I have Hampton as a red is that he is a walk-in 3-down starting running back, right?
Yes,
there's probably only 2 of those guys in this class, right? Like, and Genty's one of them, Hampton's the other. The rest of these guys, you think what could come in, a lot of these second round guys, I see easily as the lead in a committee, or could work their way into being the isolated running back one, main back. I think the thing that makes Hampton unique from the rest of those guys beneath him is that he can play on all 3 downs, but he's not an elite running back. Like I wouldn't put him as like a top 10 running back in this league when he comes into the league. So I think that's his value is in how useful he is. But I don't know that he's like ultra dynamic as a player. So that's that thing. But I think the other thing that is also kind of constantly being lost in this argument and is hard to quantify when you're having this debate is, and I know that this is kind of like looped into the value argument, but I think it sort of helps the rubber meet the road here, is that it's about who else would be on the clock at the time. Right. Like that's where I think it's so easy for us to talk about this in a vacuum where, would you take Hampton at 12? But the truth of the matter is you don't do that just like exchanging Hampton for a 12, sir. No. Yes, please. No, you have a list of 400 players that are all available to you at the time. And it's about specifically choosing Hampton, reaching past Tedero McMillan, reaching past Matthew Golden, reaching past Michael Williams, reaching past Banks and Campbell and all these other guys that may be available to you at 12 and taking the lesser player because you have a running back need. I mean, that look, we talk about reaching for need and how bad it is, and then we kind of poo-poo it and laugh because everybody drafts for need. That is the example of bad reaching for need. You're reaching cross positional value, you're reaching cross talent, you're picking a specific player who is probably less talented and less valuable than maybe 5 to 6 other players that would be available on the clock at that time.
And this is why you and I preach sequencing so much. Just play it out. Do a couple of the Pro Football Focus mock drafts. Do you like the combination of Tetairoa McMillan and Quinshon Judkins better than the combination of Omarion Hampton? And then we talked about this earlier this week. If you're waiting to get your wide receiver at pick 44, you have to assume the top 6 guys are all off the board. So now you're looking at Jalen Noel, Jack Besh, say his last name for me. I always get it wrong.
Elik Ayumanor.
Ayumanor. And there's just no way that even the biggest Hampton fans are going to admit that that's a better pairing. Here's my thoughts on what's happening. I think these big draft media people have been told that Hampton's going early. They think he's going top 20, and they're just looking at teams that have a clear running back need. And the Cowboys are obviously one of those teams. I just don't see any way the Cowboys would make this big of a reach at that position. I think they would be more likely to reach at a money 5 position, maybe on an edge guy. Because even I like Mykel Williams. Mykel Williams right now is he's at 17, 18 on the consensus board. That's considered a reach, but at least you're reaching on a premier position. I don't see them doing that at running back.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, honestly. No. It's just, and that's why I don't believe it's hard to look at it and believe it's true. It's just like, there's nothing about before they started mocking him like that. Nobody was putting Hampton in the top 15. Nobody.
No.
So,
just really quickly to tie this up, I want to answer Mike's question. He said if they trade back to get more picks and select Hampton at pick 19 or 20, would that justify the pick? And maybe, I mean, I think if you could pick up a 3rd and 4th round pick,
for me, it would. I would definitely do that.
Here's my problem. That's still about 10 spots too high for Omarion Hampton. Ideally, in this class, I'd like to get somebody that you think is a value. And if you're going to be reaching, 8 to 10 spots in the first round on a running back, I just don't love that either. But that's at least more appealing.
I have a feeling, I don't disagree necessarily, but I have a feeling that if I looked at, again, going back to my larger argument, if I looked at the list of names that were available there, I think it's going to be a lot easier for me to say, I think Hampton is as good as those guys, and we have the positional bump. I'm okay with taking him with the trade back because you're still getting value. You're getting the extra player as well in the 3rd round. I still think he's worth a 1st round pick. I just don't think he's worth the 12th pick. Specifically because who will be available. You've gotten your value in the trade back. Taking him somewhere in the 20s is okay with me.
It's okay.
It's okay. I loved it. It's okay.
No, I know. I agree. Yeah. All right, let's get to some more questions, including what's the difference between gap schemes and zone schemes? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all of your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food to treats to toys to beds and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats too. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. And auto ship is a game changer. We've got our setup so the food comes the same time every single week. You can easily cancel and change anytime for any reason. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day, and find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, here's a really good question from Heath, kind of coming back from yesterday's show. Could you guys give a quick explanation as to a gap scheme versus a wide zone scheme? I've heard you guys mention it multiple times while discussing the running backs.
All right, let's get some definitions of terms real quick first, right? When you are doing something on the side of the offense that the play is going to, that's the play side, right? If you're doing something that's on the backside, it's the backside, right? So if we're running right, everything on the left is the backside, everything on the right's the play side, right? The way I learned it originally, right, is, and there's really three different systems, right, or schemes, or however you want to phrase that. There's man, gap, and zone, right? In man systems, you are responsible for a specific defender, generally speaking. Like, this is all very general speaking. In gap schemes, you are responsible for the gap on the backside too of where the play is going. And on zone, you are responsible for the gap on the play side of where things are going. Zone, generally speaking, is you're trying to displace the defensive line going horizontally. That's why you see, usually when you're watching zone plays, you're seeing all of the offensive linemen, except for maybe the backside tackle, stepping in the same direction, right? They're trying to get to their double teams. And then once they secure the double teams, one of the players will peel off and get to the second level. The two main variations of zone are wide zone and inside zone. Inside zone or tight zone is they have a couple different ways they phrase it. Tight zone is more of a downhill run, like it's done in the B gap. So in the A gap. So you are kind of playing off of that front side guard, and wide zone's a little bit wider out. It's a little bit more of an outside play. With gap and man plays, right? Like man, you think of duo, which is obviously constantly thought of as similar to inside zone. It's also a situation where you have offensive linemen double teaming specific players and then getting, driving them. With gap, what you see is what we call down blocks, and down blocks are what we just talked about, where a player who is responsible for the backside gap will block backside, right? Will block the backside player, and that allows a player on the backside to pull to the front side and act as kind of like a lead blocker into the designed hole. So what does that all mean, right? Ultimately, how does that play out into the body types? Well, gap and man guys, they're more reliant on power. I mean, gap, you do have to be athletic enough to kind of get up on the hoof and then get to the second level and move that sort of way. But it's the athleticism is more closely associated with zone blocking, right? Because you're having to kind of get out on the move. You're going to an area. You're not necessarily burying bodies, right?
Think about like the 2000, or I guess late 90s, 2000 Broncos, where like all of their offensive linemen were like 295 pounds to 305. They could all move, right?
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's walling off. It's like creating a moving wall. And then wherever the leverage is, the running back makes the defender wrong. If the defender can, a certain defender, and again, it's different, the split zone, tight zone, it's all different, but they have like a player that they're reading the leverage of on your blocker. And then there's a secondary player that you're reading. And depending on how those two associate, if this is outside and this is inside, you cut up.
Which Dallas used a bunch of, like during the Bill Callahan. So that would have been like 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, like that stretch when they had a really good offensive line. That was primarily a heavy zone offense.
So gap and man, it's more about physically moving bodies. So you want bigger, stronger guys. That's why we talk about Tyler Booker as being more of a man gap guy, because what you want is that guy getting his hands on a defender and running him off the ball, right? And physically displacing him vertically off the line of scrimmage. And so man obviously is that directly. Gap, you're trying to create that displacement by getting some more guys in the move. It's more about creating leverage with angles in gap, right? Like you're getting leverage on a player by surprising them at the angle that you're attacking them. Right. And so it's much more just a straightforward, taking on a blocker and just physically who's powerful and who can drive off the line of scrimmage.
And what it means for the running backs is there are certain running backs in this class that we think are mostly like outside zone running backs. I think like Caleb Johnson is a really good example.
Yeah.
And I just don't think with the Cowboys, we think the Cowboys are going to be using more gap and man schemes with Clayton Adams, with Connor Riley. So we think they're going to be looking for more of a gap runner. Generally, the gap runners have to have better vision and anticipation because they have to kind of anticipate where the holes are going to be. Whereas a zone runner, they're basically just following a set of rules. Hey,
they're assigned their vision, right? Yeah, so they just have to read it correctly.
They have to read it correctly. So I think it's a little bit harder to find a running back in a gap scheme that's going to be successful. But I also think that's why maybe we're going to see the Cowboys target a running back early that has those traits to be a good gap runner.
Yeah, athletes who can be explosive one step and get up the field, who can be taught to read the outside zone, inside zone, cues right. Those guys can find success. That's why you saw those Denver Bronco teams could just rotate running backs in and out. They're easy to find. Gap, it's a little more subtle. You have to be able to read leverage on the fly. You need guys who have their feet tied to their brains so that they can make adjustments very quickly. And then they can, you can be subtle, wait, boom, explode because the hole just opened up and that's when you get through. So I do think it requires, and one more thing I want to add in right here. We talk about gap versus zone and all that stuff. The truth of the matter is that outside zone and inside zone is by far the predominant used run concept in all of the NFL, even for a team that is more gap or zone heavy. It's just about percentages, right? It's a lot like we talked about with cover 3 and cover 1. Cover 3 is by far every team uses cover 3 the most. Every team does that. It's about all the rest of the percentages of what you're using and how much you're using cover 3. It's more just that when you have a gap scheme, it's just a more diverse scheme as opposed to just specializing in outside zone.
Yeah. There you go. Hopefully we answered that question for you. I know it can get a little wordy and stuff, but think of zone as kind of going sideways and then going up the field, whereas a gap runner, you're kind of going downhill and trying to make one or two guys miss. So it's very different. All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Make sure you check out the channel on YouTube, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.